If you ask people for their favorite Spider-Man runs, Stern isn't just mentioned, he often tops the list with some of the most recognizable Spider-Man stories ever told, like Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut, Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, and The Hobgoblin. Stern's run represents a transformation for Spider-Man. It begins as old-school Spider-Man paying its dues to Ditko and Romita, but as it goes on, the stories change in nature. The art style begins to change. The run finishes as the first of the new era of Spider-Man. Stern creates a new kind of Peter Parker, one that would define the character for decades. He brings back old characters and even lays seeds that future writers would turn into some of the most beloved parts of the franchise. The first decade of Spider-Man is the most iconic era for the character. The era after that, not so much. There were highlights, but nothing ever rose to be an all-time great. Roger Stern follows this lull of the late 70s and the very early 80s with 2 consecutive runs. Stern's run begins in the spin-off book Spectacular Spider-Man. Stern writes that during O'Neill's run on Amazing, and a year later O'Neill leaves Amazing and Stern takes over Amazing, with Beam Mandler taking over Spectacular for his second run. Stern's run on Spectacular and Amazing are connected, so you should read both. Like seriously, this stuff is supposed to be important, even if it doesn't seem so at the first glance. Stern's run can be split into 3 parts: Spectacular, Amazing, and the Hobgoblin. I'll start with Stern's humble, Spectacular run. Stern's writing shines in one way more than anything else. He writes grounded stories that focus on people. These stories can be deceptively simple, especially during his Spectacular run. I'm sensing some shades of Ditko's original Spider-Man in Stern's writing. There's a crime detective feel to these stories. There will be an entire issue dedicated to Peter teaming up with Ben Urich to investigate a conspiracy. Spider-Man spends part of the first issue investigating a whodunit, and then we watch him come up with a way to get the past villain's tricks. The last year and a half is about the mystery of Hobgoblin's identity. These stories remind me of Ditko stories like Crime Master. I like the detective feel. Wayne did have mystery stories as well, but they felt more fantastical, with the whodunit being a supercomputer or a villain with a silly costume. Stern's villain is Belladonna, a woman with a gun and what is essentially tear gas. Her costume is barely a costume. This is far more believable than a sentient computer who wants to take over the criminal underworld. Belladonna just wants revenge on one person. Simply put, Stern's stories feel real. Meet Vulture's nephew, Malachi Toombs. There isn't much to him, he's just a nepotism hire. He has no powers, nor interesting personality traits. What his character mainly accomplishes is his death. Malachi gets shot due to gang politics. This leads to Vulture absolutely losing it, and we get to see despair in him for the first time. Vulture has always been a simple villain. He steals things and then gets mad when somebody stops him. He's petty and kinda one note. It makes him a perfect introductory villain for Spider-Man, but as Spider-Man progresses his career, Vulture becomes outdated. He never evolves with the times, and that works for the character. Stern gives him a bit more depth by giving him a nephew and taking him away. Stern adds humanity to Vulture without changing him too much. It's not revolutionary for the character. Vulture is still the same character, but it goes a long way in making him feel real as a person. This is what Stern does so well. Stern manages to make his villains feel real. They're not good people, not even close, but they all get some sort of humanity added to them. You can connect to these characters even if you don't like them. Tinker gets this moment to grieve Joy. Vulture grieves his nephew. Even Nitro, in all his cartoonish ego, is ultimately someone who was a loser, mistreated by the world until he gained power, and now he's paying it all back, never again weak. At least that's how he speaks. He could be lying, but I'm just gonna ignore that. It's not the type of writing where, oh, actually the murderer makes a good point. He was sad, so here's actually the real bad guy here. It's not that kind of writing. They're villains, and they make bad choices, and they're framed as bad, but just because they're villains doesn't mean you can't have a little bit of humanity in there. Humanity doesn't make their points necessarily right. It just means there's something to connect with, something you can recognize in yourself too. And I want to specify, it's not just that Stern tries to add humanity to these characters, it's that he succeeds. I care more about this Prowler than I did Fusion, for example. Stern's great at writing people, whether it's villains or the supporting cast. During this era, Peter Parker has gained a new supporting cast, characters that are more unknown as they have never really had any major roles in adaptations, nor do they really make a lot of appearances anywhere, unlike someone like Harry or Flash, who are still stay staples of the franchise. Peter's now a teacher's assistant, so are his friends. Chang, Steve, Deborah, and Marcy, Professor Sloan, and Stern adds some police characters to the series. Let's start with the TAs. Stern takes time to show TAs goofing around in their offices. Their banter is very relatable. Marcy's being catty, but she's not overdoing her dislike for Peter. It's just the right amount of petty. I love these interactions. They're what I've been missing from Spider-Man. These characters even get time to develop. Marcy ends Stern's spectacular run appreciating Peter. Chang returns from Wolfman's run. He used to be a serious character. Now he has come out of his shell, goofing around with Steve, talking about women. It's really nice to see the positive impact Spider-Man has had on a character. Makes it feel like the White Dragon story mattered, even if I didn't particularly like that one. Stern even expands the police department, giving us our first proper police characters. Captain Stacy was retired, so he doesn't count. Lieutenant Keating, who hates Spider-Man, is always giving a hard time. Detective Snyder, who's your typical cool detective who's seen it all, and he's cool with Spider-Man. For the first time, Spider-Man's working with the cops. Usually he's actively wanted, so it's nice to see him working with the law. It wasn't until now that I realized how much the series was missing police characters. It's a natural expansion of the cast and it works really well. And it feels fresh because it is a different angle on this relationship. After so many years, Stern has managed to revitalize the supporting cast. You know what I didn't expect to return? The Martians. Remember issue 2 from 1963? The Martians are back, baby. We discovered they're not really Martians. They're actors pretending to be Martians. A ruse just in case we were discovered. Sure, buddy, keep telling yourself this was some 400 IQ master plan. The actors in disguise thing does fit Spider-Man mythos better. We've had this kind of thing happen on the regular, while aliens aren't really a Spider-Man's thing. It's a natural enough retcon for me. Stern doesn't just write grounded Spider-Man, he goes back and grounds probably the weirdest part of the mythos. What I find the most interesting about this specific story is that one of these guys was Quentin Beck. He got mad about Spider-Man stopping him and that he decided he will defeat Spider-Man, which is why he took the identity of Mysterio and tried to defend Spider-Man in the original Mysterio story. I'm not a big fan of retcons, but I think I like this one. It smooths out an odd part of the mythos. It explains something that didn't really need explaining, but I don't think it steps on the shoes of the original Mysterio story. That still remains intact in meaning and event, and I never liked the Martian story, so I'm fine with that being altered. It's yet again another fun Mysterio story. Out of all the villains, Mysterio has never had a life-altering story. He's never had a Last Hunt or Last Stand. That's an undeniable classic, but every single story with this guy is fun. He might be the most consistently good villain of the series, at least up to this point. He makes regular appearances, and in almost 20 years, he's had 0 misses. That's pretty good. Vulture and Mysterio are the 2 biggest returning villains. Stern doesn't use a lot of classic villains. He does bring back a lot of smaller ones, often with a twist. Like Prowler's back, but he's a different person now. In a previous video, I said he doesn't really return, like ever, but apparently he does here, which is weird because I read this story as a kid. I just did not remember Prowler. The stories were in black and white, so I think that's what threw me off, and he doesn't have a cape in this one, so he looks a little different, and he is a different person. One of the ways these issues stand out about the Prowler issue, one of the ways that Prowler issue stands out is the visuals. During Stern's early days, we get our first female penciler for Spider-Man, Marie Severin. She has worked on Spider-Man before, but this is her first credited penciler role. She's great. I love how she portrays Prowler towards the end of the story with all these patches and this unhinged look. Prowler's threatening Belladonna, so we get him scraping the wall with his claws. I love Belladonna screaming in the web once captured. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I've always loved this specific panel. It's just kind of satisfying to me. My personal favorite art is probably Spider-Man in samurai armor. Very cool. Will-O-the-Wisp returns for 2 stories. I made fun of him during Wayne's run, and I want to clear that up. I did like Will-O-the-Wisp back then. I thought he had one of the best issues of that run. I like him here too. He looks a little bit silly, but he makes up for it with... I don't know what it is. I just kind of like him. I can't let this run go without mentioning one of my favorite issues. Jack-O-Lantern, a mercenary with a pumpkin for a head. No, it's not explained. The doctors can't get it off and it's on fire. I love this design. It just has that comic book magic. In fact, I liked the Lantern design so much I decided to read Machine Man, where Lantern first debuted. They don't explain his pumpkin head there either. Why a pumpkin? Why can't they doctors remove the costume? I opened up the comic and immediately was hit by writer Tom DeFalco, and artist Steve Ditko. DeFalco would go on to write the Black Suit Saga, subscribe for that, and Steve Ditko created Spider-Man. I read this Spider-Man issue as a kid and I loved Lantern's design. To find out it was also a Ditko creation feels like a final confirmation that Steve Ditko was undeniably really good at designing characters. Stern brings back Ditko's grounded writing, and this specific issue the artists play around with the colors and lighting. Lantern's in the dark, but his head lights up the room. They're even doing the thing from Daredevil where Spider-Man and Lantern partially blend into the shadows, or continuing Ditko's thing from the Multiman issue. I feel like Ditko's influence faded away from Spider-Man over the years, only for Stern to lean back into it, and I love it. Spider-Man picks up a heavy reinforced door and throws it at Lantern. Good lord, that door weighed hundreds of pounds and he tossed it like it was nothing. What's more, he missed me by mere inches, and I'm sure he did it on purpose. He could have hit me, but he didn't. There you go, Spider-Man holds back moment. Don't need to post a Superior Spider-Man one, post this one next week. Spider-Man holds back was a thing, I believe, during Ditko's run. There's been a few mentions about it, but Stern might be the first one to go this hard on the idea of Spider-Man being miles above his villains. Stern does seem to lean heavier into Spider-Man's strength and experience. Spider-Man throws Cobra off effortlessly and Cobra immediately runs away, which is really funny. Stern writes Spider-Man at a higher level than many of these villains. It feels good to see. Spider-Man is entering his prime, and the weaker villains are feeling it. I believe Stern is the birth of the more modern Spider-Man. This is the run where Peter Parker becomes the Spider-Man most of us probably know. He levels up, there's confidence to Peter, he's entering his prime. A Spider-Man who knows what he's doing, he knows what is right. Looking at him now, you'd never guess this guy was once this angry little misfit. Stern writes one of the best Peter Parkers of the series. This is the era of Jack Peter. This Peter will stay on until One More Day comes in and gives us the next Peter Parker. That's still 20 years away. This here and now, this is probably my favorite Peter Parker. Something I wasn't prepared for was Stern's sense of humor. I feel like I'm more often breathing out of my nose when reading than compared to others. I thought Spider-Man's quips were funnier than usual. Lieutenant Keating arguing with Spider-Man can be really funny. Spider-Man's a funny man in a more real feeling world. I've been quite negative on Spider-Man since Conway, and I don't really mean to be, I just haven't really connected with the book since then. It's just how I feel. Stern is for me a return to glory, perhaps the start of a golden age if the next few runs pan out. I really like Stern's run, and it feels like the first run since Conway to have a feeling of progression. Not as in everything changes during the run, but as more as in this feels like the next adventure after Conway. Peter's on top of his game in a way he hasn't been in the past. He feels more mature, like he learned lessons and now we get to see the payoff. The cast is fresh, and don't the relative obscurity fool you. It's a good cast. It's great Spider-Man and a much needed return to greatness. Stern's run benefits from the previous runs being worse. Being one of the best when the previous ones were some of the worst makes you kind of stand out even more. After Spectacular issue 61, Stern leaves the book and goes over to Amazing to take over from Denny O'Neil. We finally caught up with my previous videos. Hooray! We can finally continue on to some of the most iconic stories in the character's history. Bill Mantlo returns for a second round of Spectacular. That will be a video another day. The best part of all of this was nothing but the warm-up. This was the bad part. The next two parts are even better. So I think it's worth asking the question, what's the difference between Stern's Spectacular and Amazing runs? First of all, Stern ditches the TA cast and switches them out for more recognizable faces. Betty and Ned are back. Betty just says she wasn't thinking clearly during the Wolfman's run and she's over it now. The book sweeps the whole Ned Lee's assaulting Peter thing under the rug and moves on. I didn't like that stuff, so I'm not gonna complain. Harry and Liz make their first appearances since Wolfman and will become part of the main cast during Hobgoblin's arc. Or at least Harry does, Liz does nothing. Gina Wolf is introduced for the first time in the main series. She has appeared before in Marvel Team-Up, which I haven't read, so I don't know anything about that stuff. She's a detective. She smokes, she takes no nonsense, she says what she thinks to Spider-Man straight. Honestly, she's one of my favorite Spider-Man supporting characters of all time. Yes, I am part of the DeWolf Nation. Spider-Man's a vigilante doing his own thing. Being involved with Black Cat and a wanted criminal creates tensions between Spidey and the Wolf. It's not overdone. The Wolf doesn't scream about how she hates Spider-Man or that he's a menace actually or something like that. That would be easy. Instead, she gets it, even if it's wrong. She acts like an adult, a believable human being. she's the best. There's a lot of female characters in this run, actually. We got Deborah, Marcy, Marlene, Amy, Powell, NJ, DeWolf, and Black Cat, and all of them is given depth and their own personality. It's kind of nice. What kind of a man wears a Sandman shirt? There's a little romance between Black Cat and Spider-Man, but Stern doesn't really commit to any love interest. Stern's Peter is a bachelor. There's more Black Cat stuff in Mandel Spectacular if you're interested in that. These two books have been separate up to this point. There might be a mention about Peter doing something the day before, maybe a little development spread across the books, but nothing major. The biggest Spectacular arc was Carrion, and that was never mentioned in Amazing. That has now changed. Stern and Mandel's run are far more active in referring to each other. You don't need to read both. Black Cat will one issue be just laying in the hospital, and Spider-Man will be visiting her a few times. The context for that is in Spectacular. Spider-Man will talk about a gang war happening, and I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Marvel's getting more aggressive with the crossovers, and I don't like that. I do like how Amazing is a bit more epic than Spectacular. There's a more focus on spectacle. The stories are larger in scope, dealing with large conspiracies. Spider-Man faces more challenging foes, far, far stronger than ever before. These kinds of evils, even Spider-Man might not be able to defeat. If Spectacular was Ditko inspired, Amazing is more Romita Conway inspired. Spectacular issue 45 is the first case of blood in Spider-Man. Not the most exciting first blood, but I will note it. It signifies the darkening tone of the series. Feel free to correct me if there has been blood before, but I don't remember seeing that. During Amazing, a man named Norton gets shot, and he straight up lays in a pool of blood. Now that's far more extreme. On top of the blood, there's now cursing. Characters will regularly say something censored. Even Peter will think of demonetized thoughts. It's a little odd to see Peter cursing, even if it's just thoughts, but then again, this guy used to be Ditko Peter. That guy wouldn't have held back, so I guess it checks out. On top of that, Stern Spider-Man almost kills multiple villains. He will throw them too hard or accidentally punch them with too much force. All of this makes the book feel like it has aged up from what came before. Stern's handling of all that violence feels more mature than Conway's take on those things. Conway was too casual with death for my taste. Stern is a bit more precise with how he does things. The deaths feel more impactful. You still have silly villains like Fool Killer. Don't let his goofy design fool you. I thought he was gonna suck based on the cover, but the comic treats him as insane. Scary insane. He kills people he deems to be fools, thus the name. It's arbitrary. He just deems people fools based on nothing and then just murders them. What makes the villain work is that Stern is self-aware of the silliness, turning this from silly to scary. He's sick, and the comic treats him that way. Spider-Man defeats him and promises to get him help. Early day villains all were put behind bars. It highlights Spider-Man's morals well, and I like seeing these more complex endings. After this point, the stories start to get bigger. This is where the Ben Urich story happens, and that evolves into a massive conspiracy that affects the entire Marvel Universe. The story about Roxxon ends with Spider-Man catching the bad guy, but Tarantula dies and the company gets away with murder. If Spider-Man is so powerful and the stories are getting so big, how does Stern keep things grounded with Spider-Man plots? One thing he does is that he puts people around Spider-Man in danger. Tarantula and Will-O-the-Wisp rather than this dude. Not Spider-Man. Spider-Man is too powerful to be threatened, but even with all that power, keeping people safe is a challenge. There is no greater example of this than Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut. This might be the first true classic story since Conway. Wayne had no true classics. Theater of Fury and Molten Man were great stories, but it's not something people will tell you to read. The average fan will never hear about them. Wolfman has The Spider and the Burglar, which I could see an argument for, but again, it's not a story that people really bring up as a must-read. O'Neill has nothing. Mendlo is a constantly good run, but no real classics in the first run, at least. I would call Black Cat herself a classic character, but not the stories themselves, but I could see an argument maybe for that. But even with few outliers, take any story and Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut blows them out the water in popularity. I read this story a while back just because people kept bringing it up as one of the all-time best. It's on a different level, at least from what I've seen, and it is a great story. If you see a list of all-time best Spider-Man stories, this has a very good chance of being features. The premise is super simple. Juggernaut wants to kidnap Madam Web, and Spider-Man has to stop the literally unstoppable force that is the Juggernaut. Juggernaut is a massive level up from the powers of the previous villains. Fool Killer is just a dude with a gun. Belladonna is a woman with a gun and gas. Now Spider-Man's facing what is essentially a god, a primal force far beyond him. Juggernaut wreaks havoc across New York on a scale Stern hasn't shown before, on a scale Spider-Man has never faced up until this point. All that simplicity is starting to fade away, replaced by spectacle. This epic is only 2 issues long. Stern writes standalone stories that mildly connect through Peter Parker's character. You might see a mysterious man get mad when he sees Spider-Man, but nothing else connects to the rest of the run. Characters might reference previous stories, but nothing more. You could pick up any of these stories and read them alone and be completely satisfied. Which is why I highly recommend read Juggernaut. You need nothing else. Just read these 2 issues. Everything is completely standalone. At least up to this point. And this all changes with issue 238, which starts Stern's final era with the introduction of his most famous character, the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin arc is tied together by Hobgoblin, who would have guessed. It's more of a focused arc where Spider-Man spends multiple issues fighting either Hobgoblin directly or stopping one of his plots. This era also introduces major changes to the book. This is where Harry becomes part of the plot once again. MJ returns to the cast. Romita takes the book's art style and evolves it into something new. Stern's run represents the transition for the book, and the final arc is where you really get to see that begin to take effect. Looking at Peter, he quits college. We're done. He drops out. I've talked about how little value I see in college in Spider-Man, and now that I've seen it all, yeah, it's underutilized. Few stories took advantage of it, but overall, I don't find it to be something I want to see, and I think the writers didn't want to see it either. We're done, and completely okay with that. During Wolfman's run, I talked about Peter graduating before. I thought he talked about the whole college. No, he graduates year 1 of college in this run. Is that a thing? In English, do you refer to passing a year as graduating? Because I didn't know that. I made a mistake in a previous video, so just taking a moment to correct it. Also, that means that everything since issue 31 has happened in about a year's time span. The last 221 issues take place in a span of a year. That's really weird, and 100% doesn't add up. I'm pretty sure there were confirmed time skips in there. I do not like the scaling timeline. School gives Peter a clear route of progression, so this being the end of year 1 really highlights how nonsensical the timeline is. When he's out of school, you don't feel it as much, so there's no correct amount of time his life is supposed to take. I don't know. How do you feel about it? Spider-Man's been only active for 4 years, despite it being like 2 decades in real time, which sucks, in my opinion. Let's talk art style. For Spectacular, Stern worked with a large variety of artists. For the Amazing run, Stern gets permanent lead artist in John Romita Jr., continuing from O'Neill's run. Romita pencils pretty much all of Stern's Amazing. I think Romita keeps getting better here. The inks, though, can be a little questionable since changed their inks that were already set up for them. Black Cat flashbacks straight up look wrong. Then there's this scene with the cliffhanger, which looks completely different from what follows it. Romita's art style itself evolves during Stern's run. The early days were inspired by classic Romita Sr., but as we enter the final arc, Jr. begins to find his own style. The change in style naturally fits with the change in arcs. It feels like Romita is transitioning us into a new era of Spider-Man through the art style. I swear to God, as the run goes on, Romita begins to draw everybody more and more attractive. Peter begins to make out with women. You get him shirtless. Peter dresses in this. Amazing is starting to get into its kinky era. Things will be getting wild very soon, and this is just a tease. Spider-Man is starting to experiment with his art and writing, and there is no clearer example of this than issue 246, Daydreamers. This issue is about the characters daydreaming. That's it, no twists or nothing. It just shows what these characters want and fear through fever dreams of an issue. It doesn't sound like much, and it certainly wouldn't have loved it as a kid, but I think this is one of Stern's best, and it highlights his skills as a writer better than almost any of the other issues. All the dreams are connected by Spider-Man. All the characters dream of him in some way. Jameson dreams of exposing Spider-Man and everyone rewarding him for it. He wants to be a hero. That's old news, Ditko already set that up, but what I like is how this fever dream plays into the next arc with Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin blackmails Jameson. Jameson will stand up to Hobgoblin and write an expose on himself, and chooses to step down as editor-in-chief of the Bugle. I never liked the villainous Jameson from the old days. Him funding supervillains was a step too far for me. Stern works that in by making Jameson actively regret that part of his life, and taking responsibility over it. He hid this information for years, sure, but he still faced the music, and even though he didn't have to, I love Jameson with integrity. I love that he recognizes what he has done, and him and Spider-Man share these few scenes with each other where they don't hate each other. It's real. That's the humanity, and somehow Stern keeps doing it better and better as the run goes on. This issue feels like a dream, and as it never makes the line between dreams and reality very clear. Jameson was obvious, but two interesting ones are the last two dreams, Mary Jane and Peter Parker. This issue is probably the deepest insight to MJ's character in the series so far. It's something the next run by Tom DeFalco will take and run with. MJ dreams of her mysterious sister and her two kids. Pressed by guilt, she tries to hide all of this behind the smiles, but MJ's facade cannot hold. And we're seeing a little glimpses of the real woman underneath the party girl. Final dream is about Peter himself. Peter Parker dreams of getting everything he wants. Fame, success, easier life, but he ultimately runs away from Peter Parker and hides behind Spider-Man. There, he dreams of Spider-Man being loved for exchange, but it all falls apart as everyone realizes he's nothing but just some kid. His best isn't enough. The issue ends with some other kid dreaming of being as amazing as Spider-Man. To me, that's a nice counter to Peter's insecurity. He is enough, even if he doesn't always feel like it. This is a weird issue, but it highlights Stern's want to explore the deepest layers of his characters, and in doing so, he lays a foundation for future writers to build up on. And he ends up creating one of the most beloved runs of all time. Spider-Man started out as a basically B-movie sci-fi, but the writers like Stern are able to take that and make it so much more, loaded with real power that goes beyond simple, quick fun. This issue is weird, but I think it really drives home what makes Stern such a good Spider-Man writer. Stern has a lot of classic issues, a lot of all-time greats, but I couldn't possibly get through Stern without mentioning possibly the greatest backup story in comics history. The Boy Who Collects Spider-Man. Have you heard of Thunderbolt? Me neither. I read the issue and I don't think about the first half, which is a good half, mind you. It's good action, but nobody remembers it because the backup overshadows it so hard, it's kind of sad. I don't cry, but this story gets one masculine tear out of me every time. If you've never heard of Spider-Man, this is the one story you should read. It's a perfect Spider-Man short story. You know what else is perfect? Hobgoblin's design. The orange cape looks so good, and I love how Romita plays around with the hood. You often see nothing but his eyes, and Romita does often put the character in shadows. I just love this design. I love the way he looks. I love the way they use him. Might be straight up my favorite villain design of all time. It is perfect. He might be the fourth Goblin, but make no mistake, he is quite a unique villain. Still to this day, there aren't many villains who quite capture the feel of the Hobgoblin. What I really love about Hobgoblin is that he's not that strong. He's lesser than Spider-Man. But unlike all the other Stern villains, Hobgoblin is smart enough to recognize that and scheme around it. Here, Kingpin tells Hobgoblin to leave, and Hobgoblin just recognizes that he doesn't want a war with Kingpin, and he actually just leaves. It's the smart thing to do, and it makes Hobgoblin much more interesting. He isn't perfect, he isn't 100 steps ahead of everyone. He's smart because he fails, but finds a way to work around those failures. He's beaten in his first encounter with Spider-Man, so he finds a way to give himself super strength, so the next time they are on more of an equal footing with Spider-Man. We watch him turn himself into a stronger villain after each defeat. He's by far the most interesting schemer up to this point because of his fallibility. Other villains have been outmatched throughout the run, so having one that can work around that makes him appear so much more menacing. It proves himself to be above other villains due to his survival skills. The part of his character that I'm not entirely sure I like is the fake identities. Spider-Man defeats the Hobgoblin and it's revealed it's not the real Hobgoblin, just a fake one. Get used to these, there's a lot of these. During this run there's like, 5 or something, I don't know. This is why Hobgoblin's identity is such a confusing thing. It's a lot. It makes you paranoid. Everyone's a suspect. When you see a goblin, you don't know if that's the real goblin or if someone else is pretending to be a goblin. Maybe Harry's gone insane again. Maybe it's another clone. Is it dead? Maybe Silkman's leveling up. Maybe somebody else wants revenge. Who is the Hobgoblin? I love the mystery, but a robot Hobgoblin might be a bit too much, and it starts to get a little annoying when the robot shows up. The run ends with one of the best action sequences in all of Spider-Man. I love the final few issues of the run. It's fun, it's funny, it's exciting, and it feels like a proper payoff to all that build-up. In the end, Hobgoblin blows up and all that remains is a mask. No body, no nothing. Another fake out, really. Of course, he'd return one day, but that is the end. This is the end of Stern's run, and thus the end of the first Hobgoblin arc. No identity revealed, just a broken mask. A little annoying not to reveal it after all of that, especially since this is the end of Stern's run. Some other writer has to tie all of this together. Oh boy, I sure hope that doesn't go wrong in any way. Whatever happens later, that doesn't affect Stern's run. Stern's run itself lives up to the hype. Not a single issue is a miss. Every single issue is either good or one of the best ones ever. Stern might be the best Peter Parker writer. He's easily one of the best character writers. He refines Spider-Man to a new era and arguably begins the best era for Peter Parker's character. Is this literally the greatest Spider-Man run of all time? I don't know, I haven't read them all. I still got like 5 contenders left to go, but Stern's definitely solidified himself as one of the best to ever do it. Stern's run is followed by Tom DeFalco. You know what that means? Marvel's first event, Secret Wars, MJ's most important character work ever, and the Black Suit Saga. Yeah, we're so close to Fantastic Pac-Man.